Hello, everyone, and welcome to MSU FCU's Financial Education Seminar Series. We're glad you're here with us this evening. These sessions are designed to give you practical, relatable financial education that helps you feel more confident in navigating your money. We have a wide range of presentations planned throughout the year, and you can explore upcoming topics and register by visiting msufcu.org/events. Today's event is also being recorded, and you'll be able to rewatch or share it by visiting youtube.com/msufcu and then selecting the seminar series from that playlist. If you have questions at any point for our presenter, you can use that Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen to submit those, and then we'll go ahead and address those throughout the presentation if it's applicable to what we're talking about, or we'll get to it at the end, but we will go ahead and get those addressed at some point. So my name is Therese Bacon, and I'll be your facilitator this evening. So if you run into any technology issues or have any other concerns, go ahead and reach out to me directly in the chat, and I'll help you there. Tonight's session focuses on fraud and identity theft, a topic that continues to evolve as scammers become more sophisticated and technology advances. Understanding those warning signs and learning how to protect your information is definitely one of the most powerful ways to safeguard your financial well-being. So with that, I'm pleased to introduce our presenter, Jamie Smathers. She is MSU FCU's Vice President of Fraud Prevention. Jamie's been with the credit union for nearly 10 years and oversees the teams dedicated to monitoring all fraud trends, supporting members who've been impacted, and really strengthening the safeguards that protect our community. She brings valuable insight into the most common scams that we're seeing today and the steps that you can take to stay protected. So, welcome, Jamie. Thanks for being here again with us, and I'll turn it over to you to get into your presentation.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Therese. Thank you for all of you joining. Really happy to speak on this topic. While it's my profession and my job, and I do this on the daily, it's really something I'm very passionate about. While I kind of fell into this role, I actually have a father who's a former law enforcement and a mother who's a teacher. So this actually is right in my wheelhouse of things I'm very familiar with, kind of grew up seeing and hearing about, and really just truly believe and know that this is an important piece of our fraud prevention strategy and program is to communicate and share and educate on what's going on in our current environment and what we can do to support each other and to navigate through financial crimes, specifically protecting our identity, preventing fraud, and all things related to scams. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. I have an agenda here for us. I want to first start and talk about terms and definitions. It's really important for us in the fraud industry to level set on what it is we're talking about. Sometimes things get misunderstood or misinterpreted because we're not kind of speaking the same language. And so for us, we have definitions that we think through the lens of to talk about fraud trends, schemes, typologies, and other aspects of fraud prevention. We're going to talk about the landscape of fraud and scams, why this is so important, why you're all here tonight, why we continue to just reinforce the need to talk about this. We'll also dive into current fraud and scam trends. It's really important to talk through some of these examples. While I certainly can't cover all of them in 1 hour session, we're going to highlight on the ones that are really happening right now, that are affecting most, that are most prevalent and affecting many people. And then as we swing into a more positive, I think, perspective on all of this, we're going to talk about safeguarding. We're going to talk about the things we can do to protect ourselves, support one another, and really just safeguard against fraud and scams. Part of that is going to be talking about resources that we all have available at our fingertips to use in times of uncertainty or times when we become a victim of fraud. So as I mentioned, I want to talk about terms, I want to talk through some of these definitions. Fraud and scams sometimes are used interchangeably, and it's very true that scams fall within the fraud realm. But fraud is really the wrongful or criminal deception intended to result in financial or personal gain. Scams are the use of deception or manipulation intended to achieve financial gain. There's a little bit of variance there. We really want to focus on and consider the fact that many people are engaging in fraud as a service, that they're doing this as part of their profession or their livelihood. And then we also have to keep in mind that many people really are victims of fraudulent activity, and that usually is due to a scam. Social engineering comes into play. That's the manipulation of people into performing acts or divulging sensitive information. We're going to talk through many examples of how fraudsters socially engineer their victims to gain what they're looking for, whether that's information, access, or money. Phishing is a really popular term. It's probably one you've heard of. We're going to talk about examples, but phishing is really purporting to be a legitimate person or entity to get the consumer to act. And as you can see there, we're going to talk about this through several channels. Comes through in emails, phone calls, text messages, and even QR codes. And then spoofing is tied to phishing. Spoofing is the ability to disguise the source of where that communication is coming from. An email, phone number, or website can be made to appear to be a known or trusted entity. And then last, identity theft. Identity theft is the use of person or financial information without permission. And I wanted to call out this term here, PII. I might say that throughout the rest of this session. It stands for personally identifiable information. Your PII, your primary PII, the key pieces of your identity are your name, your SOCH, your date of birth, and your physical address. We do also talk about some secondary PII, such as your email, phone number, your device information as PII as well. So here's our current landscape. And I really want to touch on this because this is going to lead into really understanding what the impact is, why this is so important for us to be talking about. Today's fraud and scams are very prevalent. I'm sure many of you are here because you know at least one person who's been involved in a scam, whether from a victim perspective or maybe they don't even really realize what's happening. They're so common. We're getting communication in all different channels. We have bad actors acting in all these different channels and surveilling to gather, like I said, information, access, or money. Fraud and scams move really fast. It's intentional, right? Where when they go to get that information, they want it to happen quickly. They like money that moves fast. They also like it to create a sense of urgency to get you to divulge information. These frauds and scams are tied to everyday behaviors. It's very common to think and be down the path of something you do every day, and yet it could take a wrong turn and lead to a compromise or becoming a victim of a scam or identity theft. As I talked about, scams are very prevalent, which means they impact many, many, many people. You see on the screen, I don't have stats, right? Because you can go to many reputable resources. The Federal Trade Commission is one of them that we get a lot of our information from. And they all report kind of varying numbers, statistics. The reason being is they can only capture what's shared with them, right? The same goes for us. We only know what our fraud exposure is based on what's reported. The reality is, given fraud and scams are so prevalent and that many people are in that victim position, that most people don't report when they are a victim. So we believe that likely the number of people impacted and the dollar amounts lost over years is now reaching in the billions. And as that ties to the next box on the screen, it can cause significant financial loss. It can happen in one instance, or it can happen over time. Most people impacted do not share, which I already talked about. And it can also be really challenging to discern if what you're interacting with, what you're doing, is real or fake. That's how fraudsters are evolving. They're staying right in line with advancements in technology, with moving at a fast pace. They know how to make it look like it's the real thing. That's where spoofing comes in. Scams create uncertainty about who to trust and what to do. Many scams and the social engineering that takes place makes the fraudster look like a reputable contact, merchant, company that you engage with. And you're left wondering, was that really them? Is that notification really from my insurance carrier, my phone provider, my financial institution? Then the list goes on and on. And then scams and fraud can lead to further complications with the security of your identity. It might be a compromise of a financial institution account or an account you hold somewhere else. But as they access that, they can glean additional information. Also thinking back to how fast fraud and scams can move, we might divulge information and not even realize it. The other thing to keep in mind is we don't really know what information the fraudsters already have. Much of our data is already available on the internet, sometimes for a fee, sometimes they can find it for free. So in combination of that data that they already have, anything they gain from their victims directly just helps culminate into potentially leading to further instances or greater instances of identity theft. So why does this all matter, right? We're talking about people here, right? People can have significant impact from experiencing a scam. Some of the basics are having to get a new card reissued. Maybe I used my card online. I had that merchant save my information, and somehow that information was breached or compromised. Or maybe I thought I was buying something on a legitimate website and it turned out not to be. My card information is compromised. You have to get a new card, right? New card number. And if you do have your card information saved elsewhere to pay bills or do other things, you have to go through the process of updating all of those spots where that new card information needs to go. It can also impact your accounts. As I mentioned, you could have one account compromised or many. You have to go through the same kind of process of notifying where you have those accounts and kind of dealing with rectifying that compromise, getting a new account number, updating the information if anything was changed to data or contact information that isn't yours. You could also lose access or reliability of your device. Think about malware, right? If we click on a link or allow someone to remote into our computers or our devices, they can take that over, right? We can lose control of the ability to access our information, which means that fraudster or bad actor has access to whatever information is on there. We have to go through the steps of getting that examined, getting it cleaned up, getting it turned off or changed to another device, maybe even. PII is compromised. As we talked about, some basic scams, some basic compromise of information can lead to identity theft. If our personally identifiable information is compromised, other fraudsters could use it in other ways to perpetuate and complicate your identity, your genuine identity. We mentioned this before, loss of funds, right? If we're convinced to send money or pass along money, we could be in a tough financial position. We could lose funds that we have, whether that's on deposit, in retirement, other savings and investments. Sometimes assets can be lost. All of this leads to significant potential emotional, mental, social, and even possibly physical impacts. And all of this ties to time, right? Time is so valuable. Anytime a scam is perpetrated, the victim loses time to it. Whether that's just getting a new card issued and going through those steps, or something more complex where your full identity or PII is compromised. Time is very precious. And then thinking about the psychological and social, emotional impact, there can be a lot of hurting individuals that have experienced a scam. The thing I want to highlight here that is so important to keep in mind is that everyone is susceptible to being a victim of fraud. It's really true. There are people that I would consider experts in the industry that have experienced and been involved in a scam. Fraudsters don't discriminate in any way. They don't care where you're from, who you are, what you have, how much you have. If you have anything, they will try to get it. That could just be your identity, but it could be your money, it could be your assets, it could be a lot of things. Everyone is susceptible. All right, so let's walk through kind of some of the basics of scams, how they're perpetrated, some of the technology that plays into this, and how technology is advancing and causing us more concern than it has in the past. So some of the basics of scams. One, I already alluded to this, but it can happen in many channels, many different ways. We are seeing an increase of scams being perpetrated in person. Whether that's somebody approaching another person in a parking lot, whether they contact someone first via phone call and then visit their home, we're seeing a variety of ways in which scams are perpetrated in person. Mail, physical mail through the postal service continues to be a way that scams are perpetrated. There are some common scams that have been around for decades that continue to be seen and experienced by consumers. Email, phone calls, text messages, all the things we're doing on a daily basis, whether it's at work, at home, personal, professional, it doesn't matter. All of those channels, a scam can be perpetrated through. We also really have to think about the internet, the apps that we have on our phones and our devices, digital ads. These are all ways that fraudsters can take advantage of our engagement with technology, with devices, with social media to perpetrate a scam. So let's talk about technology a little bit more. Some of the things that really play into this are things like your device, right? How you have your device set up in terms of access. How secure is it to get into your device? And then the apps that you have on there. Do you have other ways to authenticate when you get into those applications? You can also rely on your phone carrier to support with some additional security options. But it's really important that we keep our devices safe. We all use our phones a lot, right? In many ways, many apps, right? Many different things that we're doing, whether that's social media, tracking things, record keeping, notes, pictures, our bank accounts, other accounts, right? There's a lot on those devices. It's really important to keep them secure. I want to talk a little bit about multi-featured authentication, or MFA. Sometimes it's 2FA, two-factor authentication, where you can have the opportunity to kind of do like a step-up authentication when you're logging into an account that you own. It's really important to utilize this and remember that it's for you. It's for you who owns that access. Whenever you get an MFA code, it's not something that should be shared with someone who's initiating contact with you. But MFAs can be a really useful way to enhance the security of your access points. Touching on QR codes a little bit, we're going to talk about an example of a scam, but QR codes, when we think about phishing, we actually call, when QR codes are involved, we call it quishing. And so QR codes can be compromised. QR codes, if you scan it, can take you to a bad site or impart malware on your device. On the flip side, QR codes are becoming more prevalent in society. If you go to a larger city and try to park, very often you'll have to scan a QR code to pay for parking. Sometimes you go to a restaurant and they no longer have a physical menu. You have to scan the QR code to see the menu. They're becoming more popular, so fraudsters are taking advantage of that. We also have to think about AI in this space. AI is incredible, right? It's fascinating, I think, to say the least. And the capabilities just continue to grow and grow with how good AI can perform. And fraudsters are leveraging this, right? They are taking information that's available to them, leveraging AI, and creating very believable scenarios that make us more susceptible to falling victim to a scam. Talked a little bit about the internet and visiting sites, right? The HTTPS, that S in the URL is very critical to ensure that you're visiting a secure site. We'll talk about some other ways to safeguard, but it's really important to be cognizant of the websites you're visiting, what you're clicking on, and how you get to sites in general. Another basic that I want to cover, and I kind of alluded to it when I talked about scams being perpetrated through the mail, but old tactics are still being used and deployed while new ones are constantly being developed and used. I talked about AI, I talked about the mail. Sometimes those things collide and they just produce a whole new avenue for scams to be perpetrated. But we're seeing very many of the same common scams that we've seen for decades. Why do we still see those? Because they still have some efficacy, right? We have people who might receive a letter in the mail saying they won the lottery and they need money, right? They don't know how to verify the validity of that letter, or they're inclined to believe it. And so they respond. Those things, those tactics still work. And then new ones, as I talked about, technology has just opened the floodgates for fraudsters to pursue even more avenues to perpetuate scams. I talked about this earlier, but scams typically have kind of a quick pace to them. They create a sense of urgency for the victim to act, whether that's to transfer that money or to give that information or provide the MFA code so that they can take over device access or account access. But we have seen the emergence of some scams that are very much of a slower pace that culminate and then have a quick exit at the end. And we'll talk about an example that's really important for everyone to know about right now because it's really, really prevalent and happening all the time. As I talked about, fraudsters always in some way create a sense of urgency to respond or act. They play on our senses, right? If you're looking for a relationship, they are going to go down that path with you. If you are looking for money, they are going to exploit you for that, right? So they're always looking for a way to leverage what vulnerabilities you may have. And they're looking to do that very quickly. They also want easy and fast money, payment transfers. Gift cards are still very popular. Many scams ask the victim to go buy a gift card and then text or call and give that card number to the fraudster. We're seeing an increase in scams with cash. People visiting their financial institutions, withdrawing large sums of money that either end up being posted in the mail, sent in a box or an envelope through the mail, or put in a cryptocurrency ATM, or sometimes even they meet up with the person and hand off the cash directly. Wires are still a popular way. Wires are not really recoverable. When you say yes and authorize and initiate a wire, you are taking full responsibility for that transfer. If you don't know exactly who's on the other end receiving that wire, you might think it's a legitimate company or person, but if you haven't vetted that destination, the bank account information, the name of where it's going, you could be out that money. And then P2P and other payment platforms are rising in popularity. Again, those are set up that the consumer who's setting it up says, I take responsibility. So if you send out that P2P, right, even a promise of a return or a promise that the money is getting passed along to you in some way, you don't really know unless you're the owner of that account on the other end that's receiving it. All right. I know that last slide was kind of a little negative, a little harsh, if you will. It's the realities of scams. And we are going to talk through some examples right now that also can potentially be hard to hear. The good news is we're going to come out of talking about these examples and move into talking about safeguarding and other resources. So there is hope to all of this. So keep with me here. And we're going to talk about some very specific common examples that are happening right now. The first is the one that I want to touch on that relates to kind of that thought of a scam kind of taking more time. I have listed here investment scam, a more common term that some of you may have heard by now, because this is actually something that's been prevalent for the last 3+ years, but really has only gotten traction, I would say, in the last year in terms of public recognition, public knowledge of this scheme. It's called pig butchering. And that term comes from a literal translation of the Chinese name for it. This scam did originate in Asia. And essentially what it is it's a combination of a relationship scam, investment scam, and usually has an attachment to cryptocurrency. So in one way or another, the fraudster gets connected to a victim. They establish a relationship, not always romantic. Sometimes it's more friendly. Sometimes it's business focused or business in nature related. Sometimes it's a friend of a friend, or I have a friend that invests on my behalf. I'd like to introduce you to them. Sometimes you might get introduced to the fraudster through someone you actually really trust. The hard part is knowing whether your friend is actually, realizing that your friend is also involved in the scam and being victimized. But what happens is that relationship gets established over time, whether that's through connecting in social media, text messages, FaceTime, whatever it might be. You establish a level of comfort and rapport with the fraudster. And that's when they kind of introduce this idea of investing. Start talking about money, start talking about maybe retirement goals, whatever it might be. And they say, I've recently, or I've over the last several weeks, or whatever it might be, say, I've really found, what's going to get me to retirement earlier, or what's going to get me to a millionaire status, or whatever it might be. And they introduce this idea of investing in cryptocurrency. Very often they will say, let me take the load off of you. You're new to this. You don't understand. I've got my feet under me with it. I can help you out. I'll set up your crypto wallet for you, which is essentially your account, and I'll help you with investing. They have you do the transfers to that crypto wallet, but you never realize that you're actually not in possession of that crypto wallet. You might see some returns even. You might invest and see a return and get more money back. But that's that slow build, because they've gotten to the point where they have an idea of how much they can get from you. And so they continue going until they get to the point where they've essentially tapped you out. They've gotten all of your money. They've gotten you to put all of your money into their crypto wallet. That's why it's called pig butchering, because they really take this concept of fattening up the pig before slaughter, right? They're taking all that you have, and that's when they kind of cash out. So this is a very common scam. We're seeing this very often, sometimes wire transfers, sometimes card transactions, sometimes ACH transfers. It's just really important to verify all of the information this person gives. Is cryptocurrency bad? No. Is investing bad? No. But we have to be very careful of who we're engaging with, doing our due diligence to verify them and the information they're giving us in a way that is separate from just relying on what they're telling us. Relational scams, I talked about it in the example of pig butchering, but this can run the gamut. We still see very many of these kind of overseas. I found someone, they might be in the military, or they might be volunteering in some philanthropic way, and they're overseas and then they get stuck. They can't get back home. Other examples might just be over time, you establish a connection, right? And that person at some point needs support helping their mother or preparing for your future together, right? I'm going to buy us a house. I'm going to plan a trip, whatever it might be, to get you to give them your money. Relational scams do happen in the business sense as well. Small businesses can be severely impacted if they're taken advantage of and they lose all of their business. We also want to talk about, and it's in quotation marks, government scams. It's in quotation marks because this really can apply to any public agency or really any well-known company. Think things like Consumers Energy, Amazon, whatever it might be. But the government scam is interesting because very often they're using fear tactics, right? We have a warrant out for your arrest. You missed jury duty. You owe back taxes, or you didn't pay your taxes, or you didn't pay all of your taxes. There's many different nuances and ways that they can appear. There's many agencies in the government, and so they capitalize on all of them, whether that's Social Security Administration, the Treasury, the FBI, and so forth. So government scams are really common right now. I think the main thing to think about is they're not going to call you. They're not going to email you. They're not going to text message you. They're also not going to tell you you have to pay up with a gift card or another, faster payment such as that. The next one is also in quotation marks. This is the grandparent scam, but I want everyone to keep in mind that it's just not a certain demographic that can be vulnerable to this scam. The most basic of it is that through gathering information on social media, whether that's the voice of someone you know or just details about someone you know, an individual, the assumed victim, would get a phone call, and it would be, "Grandma, mom, friend, I need help." Sometimes they say they're in jail, right? I was driving under the influence and got in an accident, or I was speeding and didn't have my license on me, so they arrested me. Whatever story they come up with, but I'm in jail, I need help, or something else that's really troubling has happened to them, and what they need is money, bail money, or some other money to help them out. And they typically say something to the effect of, "Please, let's just keep this between you and I for right now. Once the dust settles, I'm, back and things are squared away, I will tell whoever, else in that relationship that matters." So this is one that has evolved and become more sophisticated in the recent years with AI and with other ways to manipulate what's posted on social media. People can use someone's actual voice to create that conversation. So it might actually sound like your grandchild. It might actually sound like your friend in need. And we'll talk about ways to kind of verify and navigate through that situation a little bit later. Charity scams are still prevalent, something to keep in mind during the holidays. Many people make donations during the holiday season, give to charities. It's very important to know where and how the legitimate resources are located, or the legitimate charities. This happens very often also during world changes, economic changes, things like earthquakes, hurricanes, conflict, war. All of those are exploited to prey on charity scams. Sweepstakes, contests, lotteries. This is what I was alluding to earlier. A very common scam perpetrated through Postal Service mail is you get a letter from Publishers Clearinghouse saying you won the lottery, you won the sweepstakes. All you have to do is contact us and either give us your account information so we can send you your winnings, or in order to get your winnings, you have to pay the taxes first. Most often, the easiest way to know this is a scam is you probably didn't enter Publishers Clearinghouse or whatever sweepstakes or lottery is purporting that you're a winner of. Employment scams are still common. We see a lot of this through online channels, social media. Sometimes people are approached, right, on reputable sites, reputable apps, such as LinkedIn. And I'm not isolating LinkedIn. It could be any app, any site. But sometimes people are approached, but other times people are ending up on sites or locations that are not legitimate. They appear to be, but again, the bad actor is spoofing a legitimate site to make it appear more legitimate. And then loan scams. Sometimes we're in a position where we're seeking financial assistance. We might get declined at our primary financial institution, and then we start looking for other ways to get a loan. There are a lot of websites, a lot of companies that purport to be legitimate that are just not. They're taking identity information, they're getting access to financial accounts, but they're not actually giving loans to consumers. Or if they do give money, they give bad money in the form of a fake or bad check. All right, a few more fraud trends that I do want to touch on, and then we'll get into the safeguarding and the resources. So I talked about technology, specifically devices, and how important it is to keep them safe and secure. SIM swapping is something that's really can be prevalent and can cause significant disruption. Essentially what it is, every mobile device has a SIM. Some are digital, some are physical, but essentially through contacting the phone carrier, that SIM can be moved to another device. So if my information is compromised, someone could contact my phone carrier appearing to be me or purporting to be me. If they pass all the verification and provide all the right information, they could effectively switch my SIM to another device. I lose access to everything I had on my device, and the fraudster now has that control. Mail theft is on here again. I can't emphasize it enough because it's still super prevalent. Paying bills via check through the mail is fine. I would advise that you not put that check, that payment in the mail the night before in your home's mailbox with the red flag up. Fraudsters are driving up and down roads at night looking for that. They will take a check that you're intending to go to consumers or another, merchant that you have an account with, and they're altering that. And then you see it clear your account made payable to someone different. Burglaries, robberies, muggings are a thing to be aware of, right? Knowing your physical surroundings, knowing where access points are, things like that. It's really important. These are happening, as I talked about, more in-person interactions happening. People getting threatened and extorted is increasing. more and more. And then the extortion piece, this can happen in person or online. Sometimes it's a, hey, I saw you were online the other day. I caught videos of, or I screenshot the websites you were visiting. If you don't pay me, I'm going to tell others. So that is happening quite a bit, and can happen in some different ways. Okay, so how can we protect ourselves? There's a lot of scary things that we just talked about related to fraud and scams, but there are a lot of things that we can do to feel good and confident that we're protecting ourselves and others. It's really important to be aware of what information is being asked. Protect your personal information. Sometimes you go to a legitimate company and they ask for your social security number. Many times, and in most instances, you can decline giving that out. Think about like your healthcare provider and some of those other things. You don't necessarily have to give all of your PII, but just be aware of where and when you're inputting your information. Even your phone number, email address, things like that. Be cognizant of how many places and what places those are of where you're giving your information. As I mentioned earlier, but just as a reminder, your personal information does include anything that identifies you. Your name could already be out in the internet, vulnerable for fraudsters to take and use. And then they call you or they contact you in some way and then are able to get additional information. We kind of don't know what's already out there. There are ways to kind of to see, right, what's vulnerable on the internet. But we also don't know if we're being contacted by a fraudster, what that particular fraudster already knows about us. Your personal information does also include your card information and your account login credentials for any account. This next one is really key. Anytime you get approached, especially when it's an unsolicited contact to you, it's very important to do an independent search separate from that channel in which that person is coming to you. Do an independent search to verify the validity of whether it be a merchant, a website, an app, or any other type of unsolicited contact, a letter in the mail, a person approaching you in a grocery store, whatever it might be. Keep an eye out for fake merchant sites, apps, and URLs, which we talked about earlier a little bit. Be wary of links and other contacts and of what is shared and with whom through social media. If you get a text that you weren't expecting, pause. Don't have your first response be to click on that link that's in there. Same with emails. Also be cognizant of how you have your social media account set up. Do you have everything public? Can you maybe tighten that up a little bit to have it only be visible to the connections that you have, or other things, other measures you can take to be cognizant of what you're sharing and with whom on social media and the internet. Keep an eye out for unexpected emails, text messages, phone calls. These can be really hard to determine whether they're legitimate or not. The best way is to not engage with that you received, but vet it out in a different way. Go search the internet for the phone number. Get out a statement that might have contact information or another document that might give you information to help determine whether what you just got is legitimate or not. Keep in mind those types of transactions that fraudsters prefer, the fast, anonymous, unrecoverable, those gift cards, cash, crypto, payment apps, third-party money transfers. It doesn't make sense very often for legitimate companies, merchants, vendors, even certain people. Really, gift cards are not preferred, right? The government is not going to ask for a gift card and other people. As I talked about, like with wires and P2P transfers, if you do the transaction, even though it's part of a scam, if you're the one that authorized it, it's not fraudulent. That actual transfer you initiated, you authorized. So it's very important for us to be mindful of who we're sending that money to. I can't emphasize the next one enough. I kind of have this pay attention, pause, and verify mantra. It's very easy for us to get wrapped up in our day-to-day lives. We're busy people, we're social people. We like to move, go, interact, do things. We love our devices, we love our technology. Fraudsters are taking advantage of all of those things, of all of those human behaviors. So while it's okay that we're moving at the pace that we are, it's also important to know when you need to pay attention. Pause. We do things very fast, right? Especially when it's part of our routine, right? We can do it with our eyes closed type of thing. But pay attention to those emails. Pay attention to those text messages, phone calls, and other unsolicited contacts. Consult with a trusted person in preparation and when something seems suspicious. So the preparation part kind of ties back to, especially the grandparent scam. Talk to your family, your loved ones, that close circle that you have. Talk about this with them. Talk about and say, if something were to happen to one of us and it appears that another one of us are calling each other, let's come up with a code word. And so if I get a phone call from someone I know and trust, and I've established a code word with them, an easy way to verify whether it's really them or not, what's our code word? What do we always tell each other? Have that established in the event something like the grandparent scam could happen. And then it's also really important to just talk about this with others, especially if you're getting something that you're just not sure of, right? It's okay to kind of dig into it a little bit to see, like, what's really going on here? Is this real? Is it not? Have trusted people that you can connect with to get their input. That's part of that pause process. Take a minute, think it through. Sometimes having another voice just helps level set on how you're thinking about it, what to do next, which should be verify, right? Don't respond to that unsolicited contact. Do your own independent search to verify. I would encourage all of you to share some of these common scams, these safeguarding measures with others. It is really important that we spread the word. That's why I'm so happy to speak and share this information, because this is really a critical part of us ensuring that we reduce the amount of victims, reduce the amount of money lost to fraudsters. And then last, here are some resources that we encourage everyone be aware of and know to contact. The Federal Trade Commission serves a couple of purposes. You can report fraud and scams to the FTC. They're looking to gather data to help understand the exposure in the United States to fraud and scams. They also have a ton of good resources on their website related to a variety of scams. I would encourage you to check out ftc.gov. The Internet Crimes Complaint Center, or IC3.gov, is for anyone who's a victim of an online or internet financial crime. The victim can report it to the IC3. This is part of the federal agency. They, again, are tracking data, but also leverage this in investigations. If you've been defrauded or find you're a victim of a scam, contact your local law enforcement. Know your jurisdiction, report it local to where you live or the fraud occurred. You can often start with your city or township police department. Sometimes, depending on the scope of what happened and the potential dollar amount lost, they might refer you to a county office, a state office, or even the FBI. But I would start with local law enforcement. And then last, I have the 3 credit bureaus listed here. It's really important that everyone proactively freeze their credit. Freeze your credit for anyone that's a minor that is not of age to do it themselves. It's really important to protect our credit profiles, which includes our PII. I would contact all three bureaus. Just contacting one is only going to freeze it for that one. You need to contact all three. And phone numbers and websites are available through a basic URL search or a basic Google search. But it's really important to freeze, not just put an alert on your credit, but to freeze it. Make it so that only when you actually intend to apply for something and need to have your credit pulled, you can unfreeze it. But then the rest of the time it's frozen, which means no one else who attempts to use your identity and have that credit pulled will be successful. Here are some MSU FCU resources. If you're a member of MSU FCU, we have a lot of great resources on our website as well. If you are on the mobile app or log in online, you can see sometimes some alerts, some notices related to fraud. As we see trends occurring, we do try to give information to our members to safeguard. We have options to set up alerts for notifications of transactions. We also have some other member offers that can really help to keep your card and account secure. Thank you, everyone. And Therese, I'm happy to answer any questions if any have come through.
Yeah, so you had mentioned about like charity scams during the holiday season, especially. So what can people do to, double check or figure out, or what should they look for in those situations to make
Yeah,
sure it's legit?
I think one of the things is if you donated in the past, right? Remember how you've come to acquire from a legitimate source, right? People who approach you or you get an unsolicited contact, you always have to check to see if it's legitimate or not, unfortunately. You can do that through a web search, right? You can there is a Charity Navigator website that will actually tell you whether something is valid or not. So there are some online resources, but I think also thinking locally, right? If you're connected to any organizations locally, churches, other things, you can connect through there more in person, closer to home, where you can really vet out that charity as legitimate.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. You also had mentioned freezing credit of a minor, child or whatever. Why is that? Why would that be so important if they don't have any income or credit established or anything like that? Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, for sure. So it's really important to freeze a youth's credit because it could be vulnerable. It could be vulnerable in the sense that a bad actor is just stringing together a bunch of numbers that turn out to be a child's SSN. They're fabricating an identity and using an SSN that might belong to a youth. If they're able to do that successfully, when that youth gets to the point where they do want their credit pulled, they're going to have trade lines on there that are not theirs. And they're going to have a really hard time establishing their true identity successfully if they're not stopping that from happening in the beginning. So putting a freeze on there, they won't need their credit checked, right, for at least the first, however many years. And so it's really not an inconvenience. It's just something to proactively do. That way others can't use it without your knowledge. Because that's how they become really successful is when it is a youth, we're not checking our credit at any regular cadence at all, right? And so they have all of those years when the youth is not using the Social Security number to take advantage of it. And so it could put that person in a really bad spot when they do go to use their credit.
Oh, that is so scary to think about, like, man. So as a parent, then in that situation, so you contact the credit bureau directly,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'm sure they verify you a little bit
Yep.
more to make sure that, okay, yeah, and then you can and
Yeah.
then access it that way. Okay, that's good to know. And
Yes.
then another question, isn't it true that you're better to use a credit card online versus using your debit card?
Yes, and that's true mainly in the sense that your credit card has more consumer protection for it. There are some regulations and whatnot that do shift liability to the consumer if not reported timely when the debit card is used. So in that sense, it is better to use the credit card. The other thing to consider, right, is your debit card is tied to your checking account, your shares where you have your fluid funds. If you're using a revolving line of credit, it's probably better, more advantageous to you as the consumer to use that line of credit versus the funds that you have available in your checking account.
Okay. And then does MSUFC or any financial institution really, is it normal for them to ever contact you asking for your online banking login and password or like a one-time code or anything like that? Should that be a red flag?
That is definitely a red flag. Are some institutions where if you call your financial institution's contact center, they might ask you to verbally give a code that they send you either via email or text message. If that's institution's established protocol, you will know about it as a member or customer of that financial institution. We at MSUFCU do not do that. We do not ask for codes. We do not ask for your passwords or credentials in any sense. A lot of institutions do not. And so very often when you see those MFA codes come through, it says something to the effect of, we will never ask you for this. You enter it in yourself, right? And that's why it's only for you. We as the institution won't be asking for it.
Okay, sounds good. Well, wow. I mean, so much information in this session, and this is scary stuff, and like we need to stay informed. So, thank you so much for what you do for our members in our community, for sure. It's always so great to talk to you and learn what's going on that's new and how they're using new technology. Obviously technology is such a awesome thing and we can use it for so many good things in the world, right? But also there's that other side of it, right?
Yep.
So yeah, definitely good to know that. And definitely if anyone has any questions that come up later, feel free to reach out to us. If you have, Jamie had mentioned talking to a trusted person in your circle, if you don't have someone like that you want to talk to it about, come into the credit union, ask us, right? We're always willing to help you, whether it be calling into our call center or going into a branch and telling them your situation. I know when I used to work in branches, there was people all the time that would come in and just say, "Hey, something doesn't feel right here. Can you let me know if this is legit?" And then they were so thankful, right? Because it's exciting when you get that letter that says you won. It's exciting when you get that call that says you won something.
Mhm.
So definitely, we can definitely be a tool for you all as well, if anything like that arises. So. Yep. So thank you all for taking your time to be with us tonight. I also wanted to mention that we have a couple other seminars coming up for the rest of December. So next Tuesday, we have a noon session with our friends from Silver, and they'll be talking about retirement annual updates for 2026. And then on the 16th of December at 6 p.m., I will be hosting and presenting financial management for you. So you can check those out on our events page, msufcu.org/events. But thank you all for being here, and I hope you all have a good night. Again, thank you, Jamie. Always great to have you.
My pleasure. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Have a good night, everyone.